Hello again and welcome to our latest webinar from ITS UK about the current coronavirus crisis. Don't forget, by the way, to subscribe to our YouTube channel that you're watching this on at the moment for the latest updates of everything that we're producing from ITS UK. This week's webinar has an international feel, so I'd like to introduce you to three different guests on three different continents now, and we'll start with Maria Ranama, who is head of ITS Estonia and project manager at the Estonia ICT cluster. Mohammed Serroukh is general manager in the Middle East at Kapsch, and he's also the director general of ITS-Arab. And Scott Belcher, a former CEO at ITS America and now a leading independent consultant. So all of you, thank you ever so much for joining me for this latest webinar. And we're just wanting to get a feel of what's happening differently in different parts of the world and what are sort of shared experiences really. So let's start off by going to the greater Washington DC area and joining Scott Belcher. Scott, we see a lot on TV news here in the UK of what's happening in New York, but we're not really seeing much about what's going on in the rest of the US. How are things across the whole of the country?
Well, in a general sense, things are not very good. The entire country has been impacted by the coronavirus. You're hearing largely from a few of our key governors, Governor Cuomo, who is the governor of New York State, which has been the hardest hit so far by the coronavirus and has the most infections and the most deaths. And he has been really an exemplar of what you would want in a leader. He's been direct. He's been honest, he's been transparent, and he has provided leadership both to his state as well as to the region and in many respects to the country. There have been a number of other parts, there are a number of states around the New York area that have also been hit hard. New York, Maryland, and we're seeing leadership from governors in those areas as well. On the West Coast, we've had some California, Washington State got hit early and have been hit hard. Governors there stepped in early with as much testing as possible. I think the United States has been far behind much of the world in terms of our ability to test on a national scale. Our federal government didn't see it as their responsibility to really step into that void, and as a result, we've had an erratic response to testing, and an erratic response to management of the disease. And so we have social distancing in the majority of states. We still have a limited number of states whose governors have placed civil liberties ahead of the safety of their citizens, which is in my mind a travesty. But the vast majority of states are practicing social distancing, and the vast majority of the states are doing the best they can to obtain the necessary supplies to do the levels of testing that are necessary. But we are a very long way away from doing the level of testing that are being done in South Korea, that are even being done in Italy, and some of the other advanced countries in the world.
You touched on the fact that being a federal system, the states have a lot of power. And we've talked before about transport policy and the fact that individual states have individual rules, and that can make it quite difficult for providers when they are crossing state lines. How has transport been affected? And are people staying at home? Are the airports deserted? Are the interstates deserted apart from from key workers and moving goods around, or is there still quite a lot of day-to-day travel going on?
No, there really isn't a lot of travel going on. It's devastating to the transportation industry. Air travel is down 95%. So if you go to an airport, you're really in no man's land. There's virtually nobody there. There's a major financial support for that industry to try to keep it solvent. The highway system, it's take the biggest holiday in your country and multiply it times 10, and that's what it's like. It's like being out at 4 a.m. in the morning. You have people on bicycles or walking on major highways, major streets, because the cars aren't there. That has a huge implication for our country because much of our transportation is funded by gas taxes, and so gas taxes have fallen off of the cliff, and so in our federal system, the states are looking for support from the federal government to help supplement their budgets. And in an ironic twist, the vast reduction in traffic on the highways has created opportunities for construction, and so we're catching up on a lot of construction. Transit is being devastated. We will in this country we are in fact rethinking the role of transit as we go forward. Will we be able to in the future put 2-3 people on seats with 40 people in a single bus? Currently you can't envision that. It's hard to envision that in another 9 months. And what will it look like? I suspect we will go from in the United States, we're probably at 70% fixed route, 30% on demand. I suspect we'll reverse that in some manner. And trying to make that work financially, it will be very challenging.
We'll come back to what's going to happen in the future in a moment, but let's head a little bit east to Estonia and join Maria. Now, Maria, a smaller country with possibly easier to close the borders and stop the travel where the virus could actually have entered. Has that made any difference? How are things with you at the moment?
Hi, everyone. Actually, in Estonia, we have been practicing social distancing already from 13th of March. So we have been in our homes. We have a special situation here, and the rule is that people can go out, but they have to keep 2 meters distance, and only 2 people at the same time can walk together, I would say. The playgrounds are closed and big shopping centers and so on. So for a smaller country like us, we are our economy is very much connected to the whole European economy. So it is actually quite hard. But on the other side, Estonia is rather well prepared for this kind of social distancing and conducting business remotely. Because in Estonia, we have practiced e-government services a long time already. So concerning public sector services, you can do almost everything digitally. We managed to go to e-schooling, home learning from day one, because most of our learning materials were online. The e-school programs where people were used to using them, and people had a lot of digital education. So for Estonians, I think this remote life is nothing new for us. So it wasn't that hard. What is hard is that we have sectors that are totally out of business now, like tourism, like flight and all these kind of sectors. So of course and it has been more than a month already. We see that we really hope, looking at the statistics, that we have managed to get over the peak. So the numbers are getting slowly smaller and smaller. So we are already discussing how to go out from this special situation. What should be the measures from the government to support the economy now, and what are the next steps now? So we really hope that we can start easing these strict conditions already from the beginning of May or mid-May at least, and get the economy going again.
It is that balance between the economy and obviously preserving life and getting health services able to cope with whatever is thrown at them in the future. Going even further east now into Saudi Arabia, let's join Mo Serroukh. Mo, we saw, for example, the sudden closure of Dubai Airport and people flying into Dubai Airport and then not actually being able to get out a month or so ago. That was one example of what we've seen going on in your part of the world. But how are things there? Is what you've heard from Scott, Maria, kind of familiar, or have you had different issues to face?
I think we are increasingly seeing around the world very kind of familiar stories. But I think in the Middle East in particular, I feel that most governments have actually moved very fast, very quickly. In fact, in the early days, some people were even criticizing the government for example, stopping all people coming to do Umrah in Mecca and Medina, for example. So they thought it was an overreaction. But I think with time, it has proven to be the right decision that was done at the right time, or in fact, ahead of time in some cases. So that was, I think most people now appreciate it. So generally, it started off with all international flights kind of stopped. And then slowly that developed into schools closing, all the shopping malls, the restaurants, etc. And then again developed, because locally in here, we tend to use a lot of domestic flights. So domestic flight was stopped. And also the travel in between cities was also stopped. So now we are in a position where to leave your neighborhood to go anywhere, you have to go online to apply for a permit before you can get out. And you can only go out for special reasons, like going to the hospital or going to basically to see, to support some family members or any other reason. You have to state your reason and you have to wait for approval before you leave. Other than that, it's like you can only go out for, for local shopping, for food.
I've noticed actually on my sort of daily trawl of ITS related news stories that I get on my Google trawl, the speed cameras, for example, in the UAE, in Dubai, are being used to enforce people going out. So you have to get permission before you leave the house. And if you're seen in your car, or your car is moving and it's caught on camera, and you haven't had a permit for that, you're in big trouble.
That's what I've seen myself on news as well, and also from from visiting both the UAE and here in Saudi. In terms of technology deployment, it's still early days here in the region, so it's still a young market. There is still a lot of deployment, but out of the technology that it is already in deployment, has definitely been used and customized in some cases to provide early data, or even, as you mentioned, to provide some kind of early warning or enforcement. But they've also been very quick in developing and deploying online applications for like the permits and other, kind of delivery services of food, etc. So moving forward, I think the region recognizes the importance of technology. and we will see a lot of new business rules that will probably manage this better in the future.
Scott, do you want to pick up?
But one thing that I've also seen that you've been doing in the Middle East that has been fascinating to me is the use of thermal imaging with cameras to identify individuals who have temperatures. I've also read that many of the officers in the UAE have helmets, their police head coverings that have thermometers that can pick up people with higher temperatures. I find that very fascinating. You take that technology with video technology, with other data, and start to triangulate it, and you can really create some really useful data for managing the vectors and for tracing.
There's another issue that I've mentioned on previous webinars, but the evidence is suggesting, but obviously we haven't got anywhere near enough for proof yet, that the quality of the air is proportional to the impact of the virus on an area. So we look at Wuhan had typical Chinese, very bad air quality. The area around Milan and Turin in northern Italy has pretty much the worst air quality in Europe. And then you look at the US, and obviously LA and New York are worse possibly than many other cities in the US when it comes to air quality. Have you all picked up on any of that? Do you think that's going to have an impact on how transport's going to work in the future, when, of course, what we've all been talking about at congresses and in ITS society meetings for years and years and years is trying to get people out of the bubbles of their own cars and into shared mobility, where, of course, that's the opposite of social distancing?
Yeah, for me it is very hard to comment it, because Tallinn is officially the capital of the cleanest air, at least in Europe. But in Estonia, actually the worst place, we call it the Corona Island even, is one of our islands, Saaremaa, because there was a situation where a volleyball team from Italy, how to say, brought this virus in. There were local people, around 1,000 participating in one volleyball game, and it really expanded in this island. And right now they are closed, so you can't get there from mainland. So I think this is one of the cleanest air places in Estonia. So it is very hard from my side to comment it.
I think it's a really interesting question. I mean, I think at one level, in the United States, it's a challenging question with the current political environment and the passion that this administration has for oil and for oil burning vehicles. On the flip side, or actually maybe not even on the flip side, consistently with that, what you can envision, all of a sudden the large buses become very attractive if used in different ways. So you can envision large buses where you access from the rear, and then you have space so that people can social distance and you can provide transport. That is maybe a much more desirable way of moving people than shared vehicles, or and so there will be some new business models that will be created by some very creative departments of transportation and very creative entrepreneurs.
And Mo, obviously with the Middle East the economy built on oil, is there any sort of concern yet that that this might be changing? We've obviously been talking about electric vehicles, and the environment has been important with a sort of climate change point of view, rather than necessarily a shorter term public health point of view up to now. Has anyone yet picked up about the possibility that the use of oil and the reliance on oil might dwindle sooner than maybe expected?
I haven't seen it yet because I think generally people here, they expect that oil consumption will continue to grow, in the future anyway. But at the same time, there are investments into the infrastructure for electric vehicles, for solar panels. So there is an embracing of the new kind of technologies, while at the same time, of course, trying to not affect obviously the oil industry, because the oil industry is going to continue growing anyway. That's how it is seen. So there, in terms of the use of the public transport here in the Middle East, it is probably very similar to the US in a way that people rely on their private vehicles a lot more, and therefore metros and buses is something new, which was the first to see the impact out of this lockdown. The vehicles continued to be on the road, even when shopping was closed and everything was closed. I used to go to the office because no one was in the office. So I used to self-isolate in the office to a certain extent. And I was very surprised to see the roads continue to be congested. And I was questioning myself as, where are those people going? If they're not going to work, where they're going? And I can only assume that people continue to go and visit their families, etc. So I think the Middle East is very much dependent on the vehicles so far, while still embracing new technologies in the future.
Have you had, as a businessman, any opportunities come out of the sudden change in the way that we're all living, and wondering quite when and if we're going to reach normal again, and in fact what normal might be? Have any opportunities come along, or have you found any new ways of using solutions that you sell on a daily basis?
Well, I was very surprised because I thought within a week or two we will be less busy. But I was very surprised to see that we continue to receive the requests for information, requests for proposals, additional clarifications with most of the customers. So there is no slowing down from the opportunities that were already on the pipeline and still kind of growing. So, and I think the ITS industry as a whole, I don't think is going to be impacted a lot, because traffic management still needs to be managed safely, whether you have a high volume of traffic or low volume of traffic. But I do expect that as we move forward, there was already a lot of interest for city access management, form of congestion charge, some form. Was already a lot of interest. So I expect that moving forward, there will be some new business rules that will take into account how you enforce or how you basically manage something like this. Because I think while the industry is moving towards complete free flow of not actually having any gate or having any so most of the tolling systems of congestions is going to be a free flow. So there will be some new business rules, no doubt.
And Scott, you now advise a large number of companies. Obviously, they'll be looking to you for advice on something where all of us are, for want of a better term, making it up as we go along at the moment. Have any of your clients found any new ways of working on new solutions using their existing technology to help us understand and mitigate against what's going on at the moment?
Yes, yes. I think everybody is struggling to figure out what the new normal is, and it's created some really I think some very fascinating opportunities. So if you think about photo enforcement as an example, photo enforcement becomes a much more interesting solution than it has been, because of the ability to not put police officers at risk, the ability to geofence areas as you try to manage people's flow. So in that arena, we've created some really interesting solutions. Another area I do a fair amount of work in is in artificial intelligence and data management. And the future has always been about data management and the use of artificial intelligence. Well, I think it's even more so as you go forward, because the old solutions, the traditional traffic management solutions that we've used are not going to serve us well. And the ability to use technology and data, even from a very practical level of protecting and managing our workers, limiting their exposure, limiting their engagement with each other and their engagement with people on the streets, can be managed much more effectively with technology than it can be by sending multiple workers out to a site to retime traffic signals, or and once you start to be able to optimize traffic signals, optimize and use cameras to identify where the real problems are, you can really limit the number of human beings that you have to put to a problem. So we're seeing some really, I've seen some very interesting and fascinating solutions.
We're nearly out of time. I want to ask each of you one last point, which is actually that this week I was meant to be in Amsterdam at Intertraffic, and looking at the three of you on the screen in front of me, Maria, I was due to see you at the ITS European Congress in Lisbon next month, which at time of recording hasn't yet been cancelled, but we're kind of coming to the conclusion we're probably not going to be there. Mo, we were due to see each other at Gulf Traffic in December, and of course there's the massive Expo 2020 that Dubai has been working on for years and years and years. And of course, Scott, the ITS World Congress due to be in Los Angeles in October. Well, the mayor of Los Angeles has been suggesting it might be a year until major gatherings happen again. Do you see a return to normality for our industry, each of you as ITS or former ITS society leaders? Do you see that we will go back to having the big expos and meetings and having the regular gatherings, or is a digital solution something we need to start thinking of sooner rather than later? And I'll let Maria pick up first of all on that one.
I think that this situation is, I totally agree with Scott that there are big possibilities here and we should see it, but the situation but I think there are changes of paradigm here and the way people behave. It can't be exactly the same again after this situation, in my opinion, or at least it will take years. And I think we should think more about digital solutions. I can see from my side, from our member side, that many of them have already reacted very quickly with really smart solutions to the situation, how to make it better, how to cope. And but I think the world has changed, and it won't go back, or at least it will take years from now. So we should focus more and more on digital, including the big events. I can't see myself even in October in LA. I'm really sorry, but I won't be. I can't see myself with 10,000 people in LA in October ITS World Congress. So we must find new solutions together, in my opinion.
Mo, do you want to pick up?
Yeah, I agree with Maria that the world has definitely changed, and I think we are definitely moving forward where we will have to use more technology, because I don't think this lockdown is going to be over in a few months, or even if it does, we won't go back to normal. And I also agree with what Scott was saying earlier. in terms of that ITS industry as a whole. There is going to be a new application. There is going to be a new, business rules. So I think we are moving into an exciting new era, despite of how we ended up here.
I agree with everything that's been said with two caveats. One, I think there's huge pent-up demand for people to actually see each other. I mean, I'm talking to my clients and they're like, the salespeople, your salespeople are desperate to actually go out and talk to customers. So I think when the doors are open, I think people are going to hit the road and go talk to people. That's different than 10,000 people, but I do think people are going to travel, and I think they're going to go out and meet. They really want to meet and talk in person. And I think that 10,000 person meetings, I think are going to be challenged. The other thing I would say is, Paul, this is a huge opportunity for people like you. I'm talking to my clients, and my advice to them is to find people who are talented in doing video training. It is very different to do sales calls on video than it is in person. Completely different. And if you've ever seen somebody who knows how to use Zoom well, as opposed to somebody who just uses Zoom like most of us do, it's a world of difference. And so Paul, if you're not an expert, become an expert, because every company needs to learn how to do this and do it right. And if they haven't figured that out yet, they're going to figure it out pretty soon, because we're all going to be competing on teleconferences. And all of a sudden, it's going to be different.
Yeah, I totally agree with Scott, and I want to say one more aspect, that these international networks have grown more and more important, because building trust between people, it is very hard to do just writing an email. You have to do it through other people, through the networks who already know each other. So I think networks like ITS UK, ITS America, or ITS Estonia, and so on, they get more and more important now. And I really think so, and that are the main messages already that have came from our companies, that you have to have them in the networks now, since you can't be outside creating new contacts.
No, just to make sure, just to clarify, I agree with Scott and Maria in a way that you can never replace the face-to-face meeting. We know that. But I think what just happened will definitely have an impact of how we do business in the future, for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you, all three of you. Thank you for the kind words as well, and the business endorsement there, Scott. It is quite interesting that work I do outside of the stuff I do with ITS UK, I've actually had 2 related calls about webinars while I've been recording this one that I've had to reject. So it is very much a hot topic at the moment, but I fully agree with you, Scott, that just before all this happened, sometime in February, I had a run of about 2 weeks where I was on the road or on an aeroplane or heading somewhere every single day. And while walking the dogs, I foolishly said to my wife, do you know what I could do with is a couple of days at home, just left alone, where I don't have to travel anywhere. And now I'm ruining saying that, because I completely agree with you, Scott. I am sick to death of being at home, and I can't wait to actually go out and interact with people in 3 dimensions. We're out of time now, so it's been fantastic, and we could have talked for a lot longer. And so I'd like to maybe come back in 3 or 4 weeks and chat to you again and see how things have changed, and hopefully we can have seen some of the easing of the lockdown, or some of the other way transport might have changed, and transport technology could have helped us with things. So we'll talk again in a few weeks' time. But for now, I'd like to very much thank Maria, Mohammed and Scott for their time, and thank you for watching. And as I say, if you haven't already, don't forget to click and subscribe on the ITS UK YouTube channel. We'll be back with another webinar about the coronavirus next week. We've got other webinars on their way, replacing our usual forum meetings, so look out for those. And thank you very much for watching. All the best and see you soon.